Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon and watched the stars through the main window. Deep space exploration vessel had been traveling for 3 months through uncharted regions of the galaxy, where no human ship had ever gone before. Jake was a tall man with gray hair and serious brown eyes who had spent 20 years exploring space for the United Earth Federation. His crew was small but skilled, and they trusted him completely. Dr. Lisa Hayes sat at her workstation, studying star charts and ancient alien artifacts. She was the ship's expert on old civilizations and had dedicated her life to understanding the mysteries of space. Lisa had short blonde hair and green eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something important. Carlos Rivera was their best pilot and could fly the ship through asteroid fields like he was dancing. He had black hair and was always making jokes to keep everyone's spirits up during long missions. Amy Foster worked as the chief engineer and knew every bolt and wire on the ship. She was a small woman with red hair who could fix anything that broke. Ben Carter handled all communications and was constantly listening for signals from other ships or alien worlds. He had brown hair and wore thick glasses that made his eyes look bigger. The 5 of them had been together for 2 years and worked like a perfect team. That morning, Ben picked up something strange on his instruments. Energy readings were coming from a location that should have been empty space according to all their maps. The signals were unlike anything they had ever seen before and seemed to pulse with a rhythm that almost felt alive. Jake ordered Carlos to change course and investigate. As they got closer, the readings became stronger and more complex. Amy checked all the ship's systems twice to make sure the instruments were working correctly. Everything showed the same impossible result. There was something massive ahead of them, hidden behind a cloud of space dust and debris. When they finally broke through the dust cloud, everyone on the bridge stopped talking. Floating in space before them was a structure so large it made their ship look like a tiny insect. The station, or whatever it was, stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Its surface was covered with strange metal that seemed to shift and change color as they watched. The design was unlike anything any known alien race had ever built. Lisa immediately began scanning the structure with every instrument they had. The readings showed it was incredibly old, maybe millions of years older than any civilization they knew about. The materials were unknown to human science and seemed to generate their own energy. Strange symbols covered the hull in patterns that made her think of ancient writing. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at the massive structure. Something about it felt important and dangerous at the same time. He had explored many alien ruins before, but nothing had ever made him feel this way. Carlos brought the ship closer, while Amy monitored for any signs of weapons or defensive systems. The ancient station showed no reaction to their presence. Ben tried sending standard greeting signals but received no response. The structure just hung in space like a sleeping giant. Lisa discovered that some of the symbols on the hull looked almost familiar. She had studied hundreds of ancient languages from across the galaxy, but these were different. They reminded her of something she had seen before but could not remember where. The writing seemed to flow across the surface in patterns that hurt her eyes if she stared too long. Amy found docking ports along the station's hull that were surprisingly similar to human designs. This was impossible since humans had only been in space for a few hundred years. The station was millions of years old, according to all their scans. Jake made the decision that would change everything. Despite warnings from Federation Command about disturbing ancient artifacts, he ordered the crew to dock with the station. Carlos carefully piloted the ship toward the largest docking port. The ancient mechanisms activated automatically as they approached and sealed perfectly with their ship. Everyone felt the slight vibration as the docking clamps engaged. Amy checked the seal and confirmed they had a solid connection. The atmosphere beyond the airlock showed as breathable, but Lisa warned them to wear environmental suits anyway. Jake gathered his team and prepared to board the ancient structure. Each crew member checked their equipment and weapons, even though they hoped not to need them. Ben stayed behind to monitor communications, while the other 4 prepared to explore. As they stood before the airlock, Jake looked at his team. Lisa carried her scanning equipment and translation devices. Carlos had his sidearm and emergency supplies. Amy brought tools and portable power units. Jake himself carried the team's main communication gear and recording devices. The airlock opened with a soft hiss of equalizing. Pressure beyond lay a corridor that stretched into darkness emergency. Lighting flickered on as they stepped inside as if the station had been waiting for them. The walls were covered with more of the strange symbols that seemed to pulse with faint light. The air smelled old and metallic, but not dangerous. Their footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as they moved deeper into the station. Lisa stopped frequently to scan the writing on the walls. Each symbol she recorded made her more confused. The patterns were definitely language, but unlike anything in the galactic databases, some of the symbols looked almost like ancient human writing, but that was impossible. Jake led them through passages that seemed to go on forever. The station was clearly designed for beings roughly human-sized, which was another mystery. Most alien races they had encountered were either much larger or much smaller than humans. Carlos noticed that the artificial gravity felt exactly like Earth standard. This should have been a coincidence, but combined with everything else, it felt significant. Amy detected power flowing through conduits in the walls. Whatever provided energy to this place was still working after millions of years. The technology was so advanced it made human engineering look primitive. As they explored deeper, Jake began to feel like they were being watched. Nothing showed on their scanners, but the feeling grew stronger with each step. The empty corridors seemed to whisper with sounds just below the range of hearing. Lisa suddenly stopped and pointed at a section of wall. The symbols there were glowing brighter than the others. As she approached with her scanner, the entire panel lit up like a star. The writing began to move and flow across the surface in patterns that made her dizzy. Then everything went silent and dark. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing them in red light. Ben's voice crackled through their communicators. Something deep in the station had just activated. Jake realized they had not just discovered an ancient ruin, they had awakened something that had been sleeping for millions of years. The red emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls as Jake's team moved deeper into the ancient station. Amy's scanner showed power flowing through systems that had been dormant for millions of years. The awakening process was spreading through the massive structure like blood flowing through veins. Lisa studied the glowing symbols that had triggered the activation. Her translation software was working overtime trying to decode the alien writing. The patterns were becoming clearer and more familiar with each passing minute. Carlos kept his weapon ready while watching for any signs of danger. The station systems were coming online, but nothing seemed hostile. Instead, the awakening felt almost welcoming, as if the structure was happy to have visitors. Ben's voice came through their communicators with updates from the ship. Long range sensors were detecting similar energy signatures from other locations throughout this region of space. Whatever they had found here was not alone. Jake led his team through corridors that were now fully lit with soft blue light. Ancient technology was far more advanced than anything humans had ever built. Walls displayed information in flowing script that hurt to look at directly. Amy discovered that the station's power source was something completely unknown to human science. It generated massive amounts of energy without any visible fuel source or waste products. The reactor, if it could be called, that seemed to draw power from space itself. Lisa found chambers filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with inner light. Her scanners identified them as data storage devices, but the amount of information they contained was staggering. Each crystal held more data than the entire human internet. The knowledge stored here represented millions of years of accumulated wisdom. Carlos spotted movement in the distance and called for the team to stop. Through the blue-lit corridors they could see shapes moving with purpose. The forms were tall and seemed to glide rather than walk. Jake ordered everyone to take cover behind a junction while they observed. The moving figures appeared to be maintaining the station's systems. They worked with tools that looked more grown than manufactured. Their movements were precise and efficient, like they had been doing these tasks forever. Ben reported that the ship's sensors were detecting multiple life signs throughout the station. Whatever these beings were, they had been here the entire time. The awakening had not created them, but had simply roused them from some kind of dormancy. Lisa realized that the station was not just a structure, but a living ecosystem. The beings they were watching were its caretakers and guardians. Amy detected that the crystalline data cores were now actively communicating with each other. Information was flowing between them at speeds that made human computers look primitive. The station was thinking, and the awakening had been its decision to trust the human visitors. Jake made the choice to reveal themselves to the station's inhabitants. He stepped into the corridor with his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. His team followed his lead, though Carlos kept his weapon ready. The tall figures stopped their work and turned toward the humans. They stood nearly 3 meters tall and wore environmental suits that seemed to be part of their bodies. Their faces were hidden behind masks that reflected the blue light like mirrors. One of the beings approached slowly with movements that suggested curiosity rather than aggression. It stopped a few meters away and began to speak in a voice that resonated through their communicators. The words were in the same flowing script they had seen on the walls. Lisa's translation software worked frantically to decode the language. Slowly, the meaning became clear. The being was welcoming them and calling them by a name that translated as the Inheritors. It spoke of waiting and watching and a great purpose that was finally beginning. Carlos whispered that more of the tall beings were approaching from other corridors. They came not as warriors, but as servants greeting long-awaited masters. The lead being removed its mask, revealing a face that was both alien and strangely familiar. Its features were elongated and refined, but the basic structure was surprisingly human-like. It spoke again, and this time Lisa's translator caught more of the meaning. The being called itself a Watcher and claimed to have been guarding this place for the return of its creators. It spoke of humans as if it had been expecting them. Specifically, Jake asked who had built this station and why they had been waiting for humans. The Watcher's response sent chills through the entire team. It explained that humans had built this place and many others like it. The ancient civilization that created these wonders had been human, but something had happened long ago that forced them to retreat and hide. The Watchers had been left behind to maintain their works until humanity returned to space. Amy could barely believe what she was hearing. Human civilization was supposed to be only a few thousand years old. Earth's history showed no evidence of advanced spacefaring technology. The Watcher seemed to understand their confusion. It gestured for them to follow and led them toward the station's central core. The corridors became larger and more elaborate as they walked. Murals covered the walls showing scenes of a vast galactic civilization. The artwork depicted humans working alongside alien species in perfect harmony. Great ships crossed the void between stars, carrying knowledge and hope to distant worlds. Cities that dwarfed anything on modern Earth stretched across the surfaces of alien planets. Lisa studied the murals with growing amazement. Humans shown in the artwork looked exactly like modern humans, but their technology was incredible. They had mastered space travel, genetic engineering, and energy manipulation on a cosmic scale. Carlos pointed out that many of the alien species in the murals looked familiar. They resembled races that humans had encountered during their recent expansion into space. Ben's voice crackled through their communicators with urgent news. Long-range sensors were detecting massive structures throughout this entire region. Ancient stations and installations were powering up in response to their presence. The awakening was spreading across light years of space. Jake realized they had stumbled onto something far larger than a single ancient ruin. They had found the remnants of a galactic empire that humanity had apparently once ruled. The Watcher led them into a vast chamber at the station's heart. The room was filled with towering crystalline pillars that pulsed with rainbow light. Each pillar contained the memories and knowledge of the ancient human civilization. The Watcher explained that everything was being prepared for humanity's return. The great work that had been interrupted so long ago could finally continue. Amy detected that the station was sending signals to other installations throughout the galaxy. A network that had waited millions of years was coming back to life. Lisa felt overwhelmed by the implications of what they had discovered. Human history would have to be completely rewritten. Jake knew that this discovery would change everything for humanity and every other species in the galaxy. The Watchers had been faithful guardians, but their vigil was ending. Humanity had returned to claim their ancient birthright. The central chamber filled with humming energy as more crystalline pillars began to glow. Jake and his team watched in amazement as the ancient systems fully awakened around them. The Watcher who had guided them here stood silent while massive changes occurred throughout the station. Amy's instruments detected power levels that should have been impossible. The energy flowing through the station systems exceeded anything human science could explain yet. The technology felt familiar in ways that made her uncomfortable. Lisa continued studying the murals and data displays that covered every surface. The more she learned about the ancient human civilization, the more questions arose. These ancestors had possessed knowledge that made current galactic powers look primitive. They had seeded life on thousands of worlds and guided the development of countless species. Carlos noticed that sections of the chamber floor were becoming transparent. Through the clear panels they could see massive cylindrical structures in the levels below. Each cylinder was the size of a small building and seemed to contain something important. Ben's voice crackled through their communicators with alarming news. Ships were approaching their location from multiple directions. The vessels were massive and used technology that didn't match any known species. Jake realized that the awakening process had summoned these mysterious ships. The Watcher seemed pleased by this development and gestured toward the transparent floor. It explained that the cylinders below contained others who had been waiting. These were the Guardians who had volunteered to watch over humanity's legacy. They had slept for millions of years, while the galaxy grew and changed around them. Now the time of waiting was ending, and they were preparing to emerge. Amy watched in fascination as the cylinders began to open with mechanical precision. Ancient systems that had not functioned for eons operated flawlessly. Mist poured from the opening containers. As preservation systems shut down, shapes began to move within the cylindrical chambers. Lisa's scanners detected life signs unlike anything in the galactic databases. Whatever was emerging from the cylinders was not entirely biological. The beings seemed to be a fusion of organic tissue and advanced technology. Their lifespans had been extended far beyond normal limits. Through artificial means, Carlos gripped his weapon tighter as the first figure emerged from its cylinder. The being was tall like the Watcher, but more imposing in presence. Its environmental suit was clearly part of its body and pulsed with internal light. When it spoke, its voice carried the authority of countless years. Jake stepped forward to greet the ancient guardian. The being looked down at him with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of galaxies. It spoke in the flowing language that Lisa's translator was learning to understand. The words carried meanings that went deeper than simple communication. The Guardian called itself Keeper Magnus and claimed to be the oldest of the Watchers. It had been awake when the great catastrophe forced humanity to retreat. Magnus had volunteered to sleep until the day when humans returned to space. That day had finally arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. Amy listened as Magnus explained the true scope of humanity's ancient empire. Millions of worlds had once looked to Earth as the center of galactic civilization. Human explorers had traveled to the edge of the galaxy and beyond. They had made contact with alien species and helped them develop their own cultures. The ancient humans had been teachers and protectors rather than conquerors. Ben reported that more Guardian ships were arriving in the system. Each vessel was the size of a small moon and bristled with incomprehensible technology. The ships took positions around the ancient station like an honor guard. Lisa studied the data that Magnus was sharing about the old civilization. The ancient humans had called themselves the Primarchs and had ruled for millions of years. They had built a network of stations and installations throughout the galaxy. Each facility was designed to maintain itself and wait for humanity's return. Carlos asked what had happened to cause such an advanced civilization to disappear. Magnus's response filled the chamber with sadness that seemed to echo from the walls. A cosmic disaster had threatened to destroy all life in the galaxy. The Primarchs had used their most advanced technology to prevent total annihilation. They had sacrificed their galactic empire to save the species they had helped create. Jake learned that Earth had been chosen as humanity's refuge. During the catastrophe, the Primarchs had used genetic engineering to ensure their descendants would survive. They had hidden all evidence of their advanced technology to protect future generations. The plan had worked perfectly, and humanity had eventually returned to space. Amy realized that the alien species humans had encountered were actually their children. The Primarchs had uplifted and guided these races before the Great Retreat. Many of the galaxy's current civilizations owed their existence to ancient human intervention. This explained why so many alien cultures had legends about wise ancient teachers. Ben detected that communication networks throughout the galaxy were activating. The awakening was spreading to installations in every inhabited system. Ancient beacons were announcing that humanity had returned to claim its heritage. Lisa felt overwhelmed by the responsibility this knowledge represented. Modern humans had no idea they were the inheritors of such a vast legacy. The galaxy that feared the return of the ancients would soon learn the truth. Magnus explained that not all of the galaxy would welcome humanity's return. Some species had developed their own empires and would resist human leadership. Others had forgotten the debt they owed to the Primarchs entirely. Carlos asked if the Guardians were prepared to fight for humanity's inheritance. Magnus replied that force would only be used to protect, not to conquer. The ancient humans had learned that true power came from wisdom and cooperation. Jake understood that his small crew had become witnesses to the most important moment in galactic history. The age of waiting was ending and the age of inheritance was beginning. Amy detected that the station was preparing to send a message to Earth. Humanity's leaders would soon learn about their incredible heritage. The knowledge would transform human society and change their place in the galaxy forever. Magnus gestured toward viewing screens that showed images of the approaching Guardian fleet. Hundreds of massive ships had answered the awakening call. Each vessel carried technology and knowledge from the height of human civilization. Lisa realized that these ships represented more military power than the rest of the galaxy combined. The Guardians had waited millions of years to fulfill their oath to the Primarch's instruments, detected that similar scenes were playing out throughout the galaxy. Guardian fleets were emerging from hidden bases and ancient installations. The sleeping giants were awakening, and the galaxy would tremble at their return. Jake knew that everything was about to change. Humanity would soon learn that they were not newcomers to space. They were coming home. Keeper Magnus led Jake's team through corridors that opened into the station's vast archives. The walls disappeared into darkness above them, while holographic displays showed the true history of the galaxy. Lisa watched in amazement as the story of the Primarchs unfolded before her eyes. The ancient human civilization had not just ruled the galaxy, but had created most of it. Millions of years ago, early humans had developed technology that allowed them to travel between stars. They had found a galaxy mostly empty of intelligent life. Instead of conquering what little they found, the Primarchs had chosen to nurture and guide. Amy studied displays showing the great works of the ancient humans. They had moved stars to create stable systems for developing species. Entire worlds had been transformed from barren rocks into gardens of life. The Primarchs had seeded the galaxy with the potential for countless civilizations. Carlos looked at images of the great Primarch cities that had once spanned entire continents. The architecture was beautiful and functional, combining art with advanced engineering. Parks and gardens were integrated into every structure, creating harmony between nature and technology. Citizens of hundreds of different species had lived together in perfect cooperation. Ben monitored communications as Magnus shared data about the galactic network. The Primarchs had built a communication system that connected every inhabited world. Information and knowledge flowed freely between all species and cultures. Wars had become impossible when everyone could understand each other perfectly. Jake learned that the Primarchs had discovered other galaxies and established contact with their inhabitants. Trade and cultural exchange had flourished across impossible distances. The humans had become known throughout the universe as the peaceful explorers. They were respected and loved by countless alien civilizations. Magnus explained that the Primarchs had also faced great challenges during their reign. Some species had rejected human guidance and chosen paths of violence and conquest. Ancient wars had threatened to destroy everything the Primarchs had built, but the humans had always chosen protection over punishment. Lisa studied records of the great catastrophe that had ended the Primarch civilization. The disaster had come from outside the galaxy in the form of a cosmic storm. This storm would have sterilized every world and destroyed all life. The Primarchs had used their most advanced technology to create barriers against the destruction. Amy was amazed by the scale of the Primarch response to the crisis, they had built massive machines that could manipulate space and time itself. Entire solar systems had been moved to safe locations during the storm. The energy required for such projects was beyond current human understanding. Carlos learned that the barriers had worked, but at a terrible cost. The Primarchs had exhausted their civilization's resources protecting others. Their great cities had been abandoned as population centers moved to safer locations. The galactic network had been shut down to conserve power for the barriers. Ben discovered that the retreat to Earth had been carefully planned over thousands of years. The Primarchs had selected their homeworld as the safest place to preserve human DNA. Advanced genetic engineering had ensured that future humans would retain their ancestors' potential. All evidence of advanced technology had been hidden. To protect the survivors, Jake realized that the plan had included the eventual return of humanity to space. The Primarchs had known that their descendants would eventually develop space travel. They had left the Guardian network in place to watch and wait. When humans returned to the stars, they would find their inheritance waiting. Magnus showed them records of species that had been uplifted by the Primarchs. The images were shocking because many of these aliens were familiar races that humans had encountered during their expansion were actually their ancient allies. The galaxy had forgotten its debt to humanity over millions of years. Lisa studied genetic records that proved the connection between ancient and modern humans. The DNA was identical except for some modifications made during the retreat. Modern humans carried dormant genetic sequences that could unlock incredible abilities. These sequences could only be activated by exposure to Primarch technology. Amy learned that the awakening process was already affecting human biology. Proximity to the ancient stations was triggering changes in human genetics. Enhanced intelligence and improved physical capabilities were beginning to manifest. The transformation would accelerate as more installations came online. Carlos asked about the military capabilities of the Guardian fleets. Magnus explained that the ships were designed for protection, not conquest. Each vessel carried enough firepower to defend entire solar systems, but the weapons would only be used against those who threatened the innocent. Ben detected that the Guardian network was establishing contact with human governments. Messages were being sent to Earth explaining the true history of human civilization. The revelation would shock the leaders of every human colony and settlement. Jake understood that humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. The knowledge of their ancient heritage would change everything. Some humans would embrace their role as galactic leaders. Others would reject the responsibility and prefer their simple existence. Magnus warned that not all alien species would welcome humanity's return. Some had built their own empires and saw humans as a threat. Others remembered the ancient legends and feared the return of the Primarchs. The galaxy would be divided between those who welcomed humanity and those who opposed them. Lisa realized that the Guardians expected humans to prove themselves worthy. The Primarchs had failed because they became isolated from those they protected. Modern humanity would need to avoid the same mistakes. They would have to earn the respect and trust of the galaxy's other inhabitants. Amy detected that the station was preparing to share its technology with human ships. Advanced systems were being downloaded into the Horizon's computers. The knowledge would allow humans to build their own Guardian vessels, but with great power would come great responsibility. Carlos noticed that more Guardian ships were arriving in the system. The fleet now numbered in the thousands and was still growing. Each ship represented millions of years of accumulated knowledge and experience. The combined might of the Guardian fleets could reshape the galaxy. Ben reported that similar awakenings were occurring throughout human space. Ancient installations were revealing themselves on dozens of human colony worlds. The network that had slept for millions of years was fully active. Humanity's expansion into space had triggered the return of their inheritance. Jake felt the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. His small exploration mission had discovered humanity's greatest secret. The information they carried would change the course of galactic civilization. Magnus explained that the time of testing was about to begin. Humanity would need to prove that they had learned from their ancestors' mistakes. The galaxy would watch and judge whether humans deserved their ancient inheritance. The decisions made in the Coming years would determine the fate of countless species. Lisa understood that they were witnessing the end of one age and the beginning of another. The age of hiding and waiting was over. The age of humanity's return had begun. The galaxy would never be the same. Magnus led the team to a chamber filled with crystalline screens showing events throughout the galaxy. The displays revealed that humanity's expansion into space had been carefully observed by the Guardians. Every human colony and exploration mission had been monitored and evaluated. Jake watched footage of human settlements dealing with alien contact and territorial disputes. Lisa studied records showing how humans had consistently chosen cooperation over conflict even when faced with hostile alien species. Humans had sought peaceful solutions. The Guardians had been impressed by humanity's restraint and wisdom. Amy learned that several recent galactic conflicts had been secret tests of human character. The Guardians had influenced events to create challenging situations for human leaders. Advanced technology had been subtly provided to human enemies to increase the pressure, yet humans had still chosen protection over conquest. In every major crisis, Carlos saw recordings of human soldiers risking their lives to save alien civilians. Human diplomats had worked tirelessly to prevent wars between different species. Human scientists had shared their discoveries freely with alien researchers. The modern humans were proving worthy of their ancient inheritance. Ben monitored communications as similar testing revelations were shared throughout human space. Human leaders were learning that many of their greatest challenges had been deliberately created. The knowledge was shocking, but also reassuring. Humanity had passed every test that had been placed before them. Magnus explained that the testing phase was now complete. The Guardians had confirmed that modern humans possessed the wisdom needed for galactic leadership, but the final choice still belonged to humanity itself. They could accept their inheritance or continue as they were. Jake learned that accepting the inheritance would fundamentally change human civilization. Exposure to Primarch technology would unlock dormant genetic sequences in human DNA. These changes would grant enhanced intelligence and extended lifespans, but the transformation would be irreversible and affect all of humanity. Lisa studied the genetic modifications that would occur. Human cognitive abilities would increase dramatically, allowing for faster learning and deeper understanding. Physical capabilities would be enhanced, providing greater strength and endurance. Lifespans would extend to thousands of years instead of mere decades. Amy discovered that the changes would also affect human reproduction. Future generations would be born with the enhanced capabilities already active. The improvements would become permanent additions to human genetics. Humanity would become something more than they currently were. Carlos asked about the risks involved in the transformation process. Magnus admitted that not all humans would survive the genetic activation. Approximately 1% of the population would reject the changes. Those individuals would need to be protected and cared for by their enhanced relatives. Ben detected that the choice was being presented to human governments across the galaxy. Earth's leaders were debating the implications of accepting their ancient heritage. Colony worlds were holding emergency sessions to discuss the decision. The entire future of human civilization hung in the balance. Jake realized that the decision could not be made by governments alone. Every human being had the right to choose their own fate. The transformation would affect everyone, and everyone deserved a voice. Magnus agreed and revealed that the Guardians had prepared for individual choice. Each human could decide whether to accept the genetic enhancement. Those who chose to remain unchanged would be respected and protected. The enhanced humans would serve as guardians for their unmodified relatives. Lisa learned that the choice had to be made within a specific time frame. The cosmic alignment that allowed for genetic activation would only last for a few months. After that, the opportunity would be lost for thousands of years. Humanity had to decide quickly whether to accept their inheritance. Amy studied the technology that would be made available to enhanced humans. The knowledge included faster than light travel that made current human ships seem primitive, terrifying techniques that could transform dead worlds into paradise in decades, energy systems that could power entire civilizations without harmful pollution. Carlos saw records of weapons technology that could protect the galaxy from any threat. The Guardian fleets were just the beginning of humanity's potential military might-enhanced humans would be able to build defenses that could stop cosmic disasters they would become. The protectors their ancestors had always been monitored reports of alien reactions to the news of humanity's return. Some species welcomed the revelation and pledged loyalty to human leadership. Others feared the implications and began preparing for possible conflict. The galaxy was dividing into those who supported humanity and those who opposed them. Jake understood that accepting the inheritance would make humanity responsible for galactic peace-enhanced humans would need to mediate disputes between alien species. They would have to prevent wars and guide the development of younger civilizations. The burden of leadership would be enormous. Magnus warned that some alien empires would never accept human authority. These species had grown powerful during humanity's absence and would not yield easily. Conflict was inevitable, but the enhanced humans would have the tools to win. The question was whether they would choose wisdom over force. Lisa realized that the greatest test still lay ahead. Accepting the inheritance was only the first step. Proving worthy of the power would require constant vigilance and moral strength. The Primarchs had failed when they became isolated from those they protected. Amy detected that the activation process was already beginning, and some humans volunteers from the exploration teams were undergoing genetic enhancement. The changes were happening faster than expected. Carlos volunteered to be among the first to accept the enhancement. He wanted to help protect humanity during the dangerous transition period. The genetic activation began immediately, and his abilities started to improve. Ben reported that similar choices were being made throughout human space. Millions of people were volunteering for enhancement, while others chose to wait. The division was creating tension in some communities. Jake made his own decision to accept the enhancement. As the team leader, he felt responsible for helping humanity navigate the challenges ahead. The genetic changes began flowing through his body immediately. Magnus smiled as he watched the humans beginning their transformation. The long wait was finally ending. Humanity was coming home to claim their birthright. The galaxy would soon learn what it meant to have the ancients return. The transformation began immediately as Jake felt the ancient genetic sequences activating throughout his body. His mind expanded and information flowed into his consciousness at incredible speeds. Memories that were not his own filled his thoughts. As the inherited knowledge of the Primarchs awakened, Lisa experienced similar changes as her enhanced intelligence unlocked mysteries she had studied for years. Amy found that she could understand the Guardian technology instinctively. Her engineering skills multiplied as dormant genetic knowledge became active. Carlos felt his reflexes and coordination improve beyond anything he had imagined possible. The enhancement process was more profound than any of them had expected. Magnus watched with satisfaction as the first modern humans reclaimed their birthright. Similar scenes were occurring throughout human space as millions chose enhancement. Genetic activation was spreading faster than predicted as enhanced humans influenced others. Entire colonies were transforming as the changes proved to be partially contagious. Ben reported from the ship that governments across human space were struggling with the decision. Some leaders embraced the transformation while others feared losing control. Military commanders debated whether enhanced humans could still follow order. Scientists worried about the long-term effects of such rapid genetic change. Jake found that his enhanced abilities came with new responsibilities. He could sense the emotions and thoughts of alien species with perfect clarity. The burden of understanding so many different perspectives was overwhelming. Leadership would require wisdom he was still learning to access. Lisa discovered that the ancient knowledge included complete databases of galactic history. She could now read the flowing script of the Primarchs as easily as her native language. The true story of the galaxy was far more complex than anyone had realized. Hundreds of species owed their existence to ancient human intervention. Amy began upgrading the ship's systems using technology that seemed impossible. The engines now operated at efficiency levels that defied known physics. Weapons systems appeared that could defend against threats from entire fleets. The Horizon was becoming a guardian vessel worthy of its ancient heritage. Carlos piloted the enhanced ship with skills that surpassed his years of training. The vessel responded to his thoughts as much as his commands. Navigation through space that had once required careful calculation now felt intuitive. He could sense gravitational fields and energy patterns that were invisible to normal humans. Ben established communication with Guardian fleets throughout the galaxy. The ancient network was fully operational for the first time in millions of years. Messages flowed between installations at speeds faster than light itself. The awakening was complete, and the galaxy was transforming. Magnus explained that enhanced humans would now need to make contact with alien governments. Many species were terrified by the return of their ancient rulers. Others were preparing for war rather than accept human leadership. Diplomacy would be essential to prevent galactic conflict. Jake accepted the role of humanity's first ambassador to the galactic community. His enhanced abilities made him ideal for communicating with alien species. The transformation had given him perfect understanding of non-human psychology. He could find common ground where none had existed before. Lisa was tasked with sharing the true history of the galaxy with all inhabited worlds. Her enhanced memory contained the complete records of the Primarch civilization. The knowledge would help alien species understand their connection to humanity. Many would be shocked to learn they owed their existence to human ancestors. Amy began designing new ships and installations using ancient Primarch blueprints. The technology would allow humanity to protect the galaxy from any threat. Construction projects were starting on dozens of worlds as resources became available. The Guardian network was expanding for the first time in millions of years. Carlos led missions to contact alien governments and explain the new reality. His enhanced diplomacy skills prevented several potential conflicts. Species that had initially feared human return began to accept their leadership. The transition was proceeding more smoothly than the Guardians had hoped. Ben coordinated communications between enhanced humans and their unmodified relatives. The choice to remain unchanged was being respected throughout human space communities. Were adapting to having both enhanced and normal humans living together. The social changes were challenging but manageable. Jake visited Earth to address the United Nations and explain humanity's inheritance. The revelation that humans were the galaxy's ancient rulers shocked the entire planet. Some nations embraced their new role while others struggled with the responsibility. The enhanced humans worked patiently to build consensus and understanding. Lisa published the true history of galactic civilization for all species to read. The response was mixed as some aliens welcomed the knowledge while others rejected it. Ancient legends were confirmed as fact while modern assumptions were overturned. The galaxy's understanding of itself was fundamentally changing. Amy oversaw the construction of new Guardian stations in every major star system the installations would serve. As protection against cosmic threats and centers of learning, alien species were invited to participate in the projects as partners rather than subjects. The collaborative approach helped reduce fears about human domination. Carlos established diplomatic relations with species that had never met humans before. His enhanced abilities allowed him to understand and respect their unique cultures. Trade agreements and mutual defense pacts were signed across the galaxy. The ancient dream of galactic cooperation was becoming reality again. Ben monitored the responses of hostile alien empires that refused to accept human leadership. Some species were gathering fleets to challenge humanity's return. Enhanced humans would need to defend themselves and their allies, but they were determined to use minimal force and seek peaceful solutions. Magnus expressed pride in how well the modern humans were handling their inheritance. They were avoiding the mistakes that had led to the Primarch civilization's isolation. The enhanced humans remained connected to their unmodified relatives and alien allies. This galaxy was being unified through cooperation rather than conquest. Jake realized that humanity's greatest test was just beginning. Accepting the inheritance had been easy compared to proving worthy of it. Enhanced humans would need to guide the galaxy for millions of years. Each decision would affect countless species and future generations. Lisa understood that the knowledge they had gained came with eternal responsibility. The enhanced humans would become the guardians that the Primarchs had always intended. They would protect and nurture the galaxy's countless civilizations. The age of waiting was over, and the age of stewardship had begun. Amy completed the first new Guardian vessel built by enhanced humans, The ship represented the marriage of ancient wisdom and modern innovation. It would serve as a symbol of humanity's commitment to galactic protection. The Guardian fleets were no longer alone. In their eternal vigil, the galaxy that had once feared the return of the ancients now looked to humanity with hope enhanced. Humans were proving to be worthy inheritors of their ancient legacy. The long sleep was ending, and the golden age was beginning. Again humanity had come home to claim their birthright, and the stars themselves rejoiced.